Wow. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Bleacher Report. My name is John Viveiros, host of Hot Take Hockey, and here on BR, NHL Daily, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We got a breaking news trade right as I was starting, and I don't know if the technical difficulties had anything to do with the breaking trade, but hey, we're here, we're live, and definitely get your thoughts in the comment section. The Tampa Bay Lightning just made a huge blockbuster trade. We're getting the details in here as we are live here on Bleacher Report. So crazy. Make sure you guys share the stream around, and yeah, we're gonna show some stuff on the screen as well. So yeah, make sure you guys spread the word on the channel of Bleacher Report for the app, for all social pages, and yeah, we'll go from there. But it's crazy. I'm looking here on X right now. Elliot Friedman, NHL Insider, is saying that it could be 2 first-round picks from the Tampa Bay Lightning, potentially a second-round pick, and Eyssimont to Seattle for Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde. So it's also Pierre LeBrun talking about it as well. Crazy. There's got to be retention here for Yanni Gourde. I'm actually going to send out on Bleacher Report, so make sure you guys go on X or go on any social media page and share. I am live on Bleacher Report talking about the Yanni Gourde trade. Oliver Bjorkstrand trade. So, I mean, this is crazy. I already think that the fact that this is happening and we're on Wednesday right now is nuts. There we go. All right, so let's put it on the screen. I just sent it out. So here we go from NHL Insider Pierre LeBrun. Seattle gets a first-round pick in 26, a first-round pick in 27, Toronto second in 25, and Eyssimont in trade with Tampa. Bolts get Gourde and Bjorkstrand. Ridiculous. So again, I think how we look at like the Tampa Bay Lightning right now is they're just that aggressive team that gets things done. To me, they've always been the team that is not afraid of the backlash. I mean, here's the thing. Agree or disagree, they moved on from Steven Stamkos. They didn't sign him. They gave him the offer they did, and they didn't sway from it. I mean, they just said, hey, this is what we feel is the best situation for us, and we are loyal to you to a point. And again, I agree with that? Maybe not. I think Steven Stamkos deserved better in Tampa. But based on the hockey on the ice, it seems like Tampa's made the right call here. You need to make aggressive moves and bold moves like this to win in the playoffs and win when it matters. The fact that they didn't give up Isaac Howard, their top prospect in this trade, is a win. They didn't give up Ethan Gauthier either, which is one of their better prospects as well. Yeah, they gave up 2 first-round picks. I mean, 2 first-round picks is a lot. They also gave up a second-round pick. I've liked Eysimont's fit with Tampa. I thought it was a great fit. I will say, though, I do think that the fact that Seattle has been willing to retain and deal these kind of guys, here's the thing. Drew also makes this point, and I think it's a great point. I think they're favorites to come out of the East now. I think they're going to be right there with Florida and Toronto to compete for that top spot in the Atlantic the rest of the way. And then when it comes to playoff time, I think it's going to be big as well. I also think that when you look at the Tampa Bay Lightning and their winning ways, I mean, they're bringing back Yanni Gourde. So don't forget, Yanni Gourde was once with the Tampa Bay Lightning. He has that Stanley Cup winning experience with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I think that's a huge factor here. And frankly, when you look at the Lightning in their stretch of playoff wins and their playoff runs and their Stanley Cup wins, a lot of it has to do with their depth players. A lot of it has to do with their role players, their identity. And I feel like Yanni Gourde already knows how the Lightning operate, already knows John Cooper well, all of that stuff. So that's one aspect. And then 2, Bjorkstrand, I kind of had it on the screen earlier just for my own logic and knowledge, but we'll pull it up on the screen for BR here. So when you look at, here we go. When you look at his numbers, I mean, he's got impressive numbers. So you see there just to the left of my screen, 37 points this season in 61 games. If you look right here, though, this is the key numbers for me. His last playoff appearance was with Seattle in 23. That was the first round against Colorado, and then got to the second round, got eliminated. 8 points through 14 games, 4 goals to show for it. That's really all you need from a third line guy or a second line guy. And I think Bjorkstrand's going to be that for Tampa. How I look at their lines going forward, I mean, it's a little back and forth for me, but I think how I look at it is they've got like 4 or 5 centers now. So if we go look at their current lineup, they've got a lot of options to work with. So the Isamont one's interesting because I think Tampa wanted more from him, but at the end of the day, you get what you get from a guy that was playing minors and then played third line for you, probably a little bit of above his, I would say, abilities in terms of consistent hockey. But your top line is Gensel, Point, Kucherov. Your second line, Hagel, Cirelli, Girgensons. That's going to change. I think Bjorkstrand probably steps into that second line to start. So think about it. Gensel, Point, Kucherov, Hagel, Cirelli, Girgensons. And then your third line is probably Nick Paul. Yeah, I mean, is Nick Paul sliding to the left wing if Yanni Gourde goes center? Maybe. Chaffee could go third line or fourth line. I mean, the more I think about it, I think that's probably their third line. I think you probably slide Nick Paul to the wing, and that's how you run it. So Gensel. Yeah, Gensel, Point, Kucherov, Hagel, Cirelli. I would say, yeah, Bjorkstrand goes third or second line. And then third line, Paul, Gourde, and Chaffee. I think that's the way to go. It's pretty solid from Tampa. It is definitely pretty solid. That's your top 9. Crazy. So that's the Lightning. I mean, they're aggressive. I'm speechless. But here's the thing. I think when you talk about John Cooper, Brisbois, yeah, and Frank Saravalli, NHL Insider, had talked about it like a few hours ago. But yeah, Pierre LeBrun on it. Creds to him. He had the full trade. So, yeah, Isamont will be a guy that will have a chance to play in the bottom 6 in Seattle. But I think the big part here for Seattle is the fact that they got 2 firsts and a second. Obviously, Yanni Gourde was going to always get a first-round pick, in my opinion, based on the market, based on the seller's market, the center market. Yanni Gourde was always going to get a big return. And then, yeah, I mean, Bjorkstrand for me is one of those really interesting players. I think Seattle was willing to trade him too because it's kind of a double-edged sword here. It's like you don't want to trade a player when they're not having a great year because the value's gone down. But like a lot of teams love Bjorkstrand's two-way ability and love the small amount he's shown in the playoffs. So like the fact is, like, Tampa wanted a right winger, and Bjorkstrand fits the bill of a guy, as I said, that can play second or third line. He's going to plug in right on that second line. It's big time for the Lightning. And when I look at the Lightning, also their injuries, like they've had some on defense mostly, and they're mostly healthy again. I mean, JJ Moser, I think, just got back, so he's playing with Hedman again, and then you got McDonough and Chernak. Like, that's a legit top 4 in the East. And then Vasilevsky. If Vasilevsky can turn it on in the right time, the Lightning are right back to being one of the best contenders. So that's where my head's at. I'm going to actually get some predictions going here, and Yanni Gourde and Bjorkstrand are with the Lightning. So I actually had added that prior to entering in here. So let's go into the predictions. We're not going to waste any time. We know the Lightning trade. What are the ramifications? What are teams going to do now that the Lightning have made this big blockbuster to acquire Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand from the Seattle Kraken? So the rest of the way, predicting destinations. Brock Nelson, I think he might stay, but if I had to make a choice, it's Minnesota Wild. I'd also look at the Winnipeg Jets too. I mean, Brock Nelson had that emotional post-game interview, and he kind of talked about his time with the Islanders, how proud he is to be part of the Islanders. And they beat the Winnipeg Jets. I think he's probably going to go closer to home, whether it's through trade or free agency in the offseason, if he doesn't stay with the Islanders. So that's the big kind of point I'll make. I think he loves being on Long Island. I think he loves being with the Islanders. But at the same time, he's a big fish in this trade market and a seller's market. If a team comes knocking with a massive offer, like the Wild or like the Jets, I also think there's a chance that one of those teams could re-sign him too. So the value is there. If you give up the big value, you give up the big trade package, you also have the potential of re-signing this player, especially if there's that home aspect. And I think for Minnesota, I mean, that'd be his homecoming. So I think that makes the most sense. Scott Laughton, I feel like he's staying. I think he's staying. Like, I'd be surprised. I do think there's some rumblings around Toronto going after a 2 combo package, whether it's 2 forwards or a forward in defense. Laughton and Ristolainen have been in those conversations. Brandon Tanev to Toronto, I keep saying that. I think they're talking to Seattle. They were probably talking to Seattle a lot about Yanni Gourde and Bjorkstrand. I was hearing that they were maybe looking at Tanev and Gourde, try to swoop Gourde out from Tampa, but Tampa got super aggressive. I mean, here's the thing. Leafs were never going to beat this offer. And it's sad, but Leaf fans need to hear it. Yeah, I mean, that's the part that's the part people need to realize. And I think Toronto's kind of in that boat where they're a little bit more reserved. Winnipeg's in that boat where they're a little bit more reserved. Riley Smith, that's why I have him going to Winnipeg. I think that's kind of the fit that I'm looking at for the Jets. Kind of that Niederreiter-esque player where they acquire a middle six guy. That makes sense. Luke Cunningham, I've said to Toronto, I think they're looking for a right shot guy that can play center, play wing. I would say Luke Cunningham fits that bill. There's also some U.S. development program background where he knows Austin Matthews well, things like that. Then let's look at the next list. Carson Soucy to the Calgary Flames. Alberta boy. I feel like he could go to Calgary or Edmonton. That would make a lot of sense. Kyle Palmieri back to Jersey. Honestly, if there's one guy that I think is more likely that the Islanders would trade, it's Palmieri over Nelson. I also think they could trade Pajot, but I feel like they got to move one of them. Like, you got to get some assets back. Lula Morello, send Palmieri back to Jersey. Be a nice guy. I know you're quiet. You don't want to give up your source, your information to sources, but Palmieri to Jersey boy makes a lot of sense, even though it's in division. Joel Armida, Colorado. I feel like Montreal, they might make one seller's move and then one buyer's move before the deadline. Like, they're right in the playoff race, but they should be selling, in my opinion. They're not ready to compete in the playoffs. So if they could get an asset for Joel Armia or David Savard, like maybe a third for Armia, maybe a first for David Savard, I think that's good business before the deadline, and then acquire maybe a Trevor Zegras. I also think I was going to talk about it more at the start of the stream here on the Jack Hughes Devils situation. Maybe I mentioned it at the end, but obviously that big Lightning trade happened. I wonder if the Devils look at Anaheim for a potential replacement. Zegras could make some sense. If Jack Hughes is out for the rest of the season, maybe they put him on LTIR and they could just absorb Zegras's cap hit. I think that could make some sense. Blockbuster to Carolina. I had it there, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if Vancouver keeps Besser. They're right in the playoff mix as well. And I had Justin Brazeau and Frederick maybe going to Washington. Trenton Frederick ends up getting traded to the Edmonton Oilers, so that happened this week. Justin Brazeau to Washington still makes a lot of sense. They're looking for a right winger. He's cheap, not a big cap hit at all. This would be just kind of a third-round pick. Call it a day. Brazeau joins a fourth line ran by Nick Dowd. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it would be a perfect fit. Jamie Alexiak on the Calgary Flames. I honestly have both of them going to Calgary, but I truly think only one of them will go, or none of them. But I think one of them makes sense, and then maybe Edmonton goes for the other or goes for Connor Murphy. Jared McCann to the Florida Panthers. I think the Panthers are going to have to respond after what the Lightning just did, acquiring Yanni Gourde and Bjorkstrand. So I think if they go after Jared McCann, it makes a lot of sense. And I do think that Seattle is ready for business. I think that was made clear today. Peter Mrazek to the Edmonton Oilers. The San Jose Sharks just traded Vanacek to the Florida Panthers. So the Panthers get their new backup goalie or one of their backup goalies. They could also go for Drieger if they wanted, but Mrazek, Edmonton, and then Yanni Gourde to Tampa. I had that before. And of course, now Yanni Gourde's traded to the Lightning. And then you look at the next list, Oliver Bjorkstrand to the Tampa Bay Lightning. I originally had him going to the Winnipeg Jets earlier this morning when Friedman was kind of putting those whispers out. I changed it to Tampa. I just feel like when there's smoke around Tampa doing something, it ends up happening in most cases. So that's what happened here. Connor Murphy to the Edmonton Oilers. Makes a lot of sense. Jason Zucker to the LA Kings. California boy. As I said, I think the Oilers and Flames will each acquire a defenseman. We'll see who it is. Tuck, I feel like the more I hear around Buffalo, they're re-signing Jordan Greenway. It seems like Tuck is staying, and they might re-sign Zucker. I think that's dumb. People have got to stop making excuses for this team. You are in the basement of the league. You need to get assets for these players. You should not be re-signing 33-year-old Jason Zucker. As great of a season he's had, you should not be doing that. Rasmus Ristolainen to the Dallas Stars. As I said, I think Toronto's looking at Ristolainen. I think Dallas has looked at him. I think Dallas probably makes more sense because they missed it on Seth Jones, and Dumba would go the other way in that deal. Send a first-round pick. Lucas Reichel, Edmonton. Again, I think Edmonton, Chicago can make a trade together. It makes a lot of sense. And again, Ryan Donato to the Edmonton Oilers. I think Ottawa, though, might get aggressive here. Like the fact that Ottawa missed out on Yanni Gourde, they missed out on some of these players. I think they might look at that. But Ryan Donato, Edmonton, Braden Shen, Vegas. I think Vegas, again, now Tampa started a domino effect. As much as you can hate Tampa, you can thank them for the domino effect in coming here. It makes a lot of sense that teams are going to respond. Brian Dumoulin, Minnesota Wild. There's that John Hines connection I had talked about on the YouTube video. David Savard, Colorado. You know what? I think the Avs, they want Josh Manson to slide down the lineup. He's got the injury right now, so we'll see what happens. But I think David Savard would be a better fit in that top four than what they have right now, which is like Shillington in the top four. So David Savard to Colorado could make some sense. I think they're looking for more depth, better overall defense group. Yeah, Nick Bjugstad to Toronto. I think Bjugstad or Luke Cunnin. I don't have them acquiring both, but I wanted to make the prediction of they're going to acquire one of them. Maybe. I don't know. And then let's go to the final list I have here. Michael McCarron, he's a Michigan boy, so going to Detroit makes some sense. Bowen Byram to the Vancouver Canucks. Dylan Cousins to the Vancouver Canucks for Elias Pettersson. Massive hot take. I don't know if it happens. I hope it does happen because there's two perspectives for me. And I talked about it already. When you're losing as much as you've been the last few years in the organization, when I'm talking about the Buffalo Sabres, you just have to make personnel changes and have to get different perspectives in. Pettersson is in such a negative aspect with Vancouver, who have won recently, at least like playoff games. I just feel like maybe going to Buffalo, where like the expectations are already so low, maybe he just bonds with Rasmus Dahlin, fellow Swede, and just maybe changes the tune of his career. He's only seen Vancouver. And then on the other side, Dylan Cousins and Bowen Byram. Well, Byram has a Stanley Cup to his name. Dylan Cousins has only seen Buffalo. Going to Vancouver, both those guys are from out west. I think it makes a lot of sense for both teams. Even if Vancouver has to add a couple assets in there, I think Vancouver should do that in a heartbeat. Pettersson's not working out. It's not looking good right now. He's got to turn it around. And if he doesn't, you should have made that move. You really should. And if there's any scenario for that deal to be back on the table and you just have to add a couple assets, like a couple second-round picks, friggin' do it. Actually do it. Ricard Raquel to Colorado. I could see Colorado doing like two more moves. One for a defenseman, one for a forward. They already acquired Ryan Lindgren. They already made the Martin H.S. Ristolainen trade. I could see them doing one or two more. So we'll see. And yeah, there's a lot of rumblings around what the Lightning new lines look like. But yeah, I mean, they're stacked. They're definitely stacked. So there's a lot of also conversation around Buffalo, the re-signing of Jason Zucker, as I just mentioned. But at the same time, like the value of what you can get for some of these guys, it's crazy. Like Bjorkstrand signed longer term. I think he's a UFA next year, 2026 maybe. So when I say longer term, like he's not a rental. Or Yanni Gourde is a UFA this summer. So that's how it goes. But actual insanity going on here. And then there's that speculation around Vancouver for some other moves. Like P.S. Suter was apparently on the block beyond Carson Soucy. And then some teams calling on Derek Forbert as well. So keep an eye on that. So let's pull up the this kind of quote from David Pagnotta of the fourth period. So the Maple Leafs have been after Scott Laughton and Rasmus Ristolainen essentially since Brad Treliving took over as Leafs GM a few seasons ago. There was a deal on the table 2 drafts ago in Nashville for a first-round pick, but Toronto chose not to make the trade. While Ristolainen struggled early in his career in Buffalo, he has been much better since joining Philadelphia, though his reputation from those early years has lingered, especially among fans. If placed in a stronger, more competitive environment on a contending team, he could stabilize the blue line. He has 2 years left on his contract, while Scott Laughton has 1. Philadelphia's asking price includes Fraser Minton, a player they've been interested in for over a month. Toronto remains reluctant to trade next year's first-round pick, so they have to decide if including Minton and possibly more in a package deal makes sense. Acquiring both players would take on $8.1 million, 5.1 towards Ristolainen and 3 for Laughton, which would require cap juggling. Given this, it's unlikely that a deal likely will happen. So that's where it stands right now. I'll say this for the Scott Laughton and Ristolainen thing with Toronto. Yeah, I mean, you'd have to get some retention from like Laughton, for example, which would get it down to about 6.5. Then you'd have to send Kampf and Yarncrow the other way, which is about 4.5. So then you're closer. And then maybe even Max Domi goes the other way. Right now, would I rather have Laughton over Domi? Probably. But it's not that far off from what people are saying. Like Domi still is productive in the playoffs. Like he just showed that. And he scored a big Game 7 goal for Carolina. I don't forget that. He looked all right with Dallas. He looked all right in the playoffs last year for Toronto. He was not the issue against Boston. So there's so many layers for me in terms of Max Domi where like I think he can be that playoff guy. And so can Laughton. So if there was a third line scenario where the Leafs' third line was Bobby McMahon, Scott Laughton, and Domi, I think you're pretty content with that. But then what does that mean for Nick Robertson? I think that's kind of the big perspective for Toronto. Beyond that, we got to talk about the Jack Hughes perspective here. I do think, like I said, I wanted to talk about it before at the start of the stream, but then the massive Lightning trade happened. So I think we can talk about it now. So Jack Hughes got injured, I think 2 nights ago. So we'll just play the clip quickly here. And Michael tries to help him up. Nothing happens. So that was tough to watch. So overall, the message has kind of been the Devils' perspective at the deadline could be changing their perspective. And frankly, a lot of people are maybe looking at the Devils to miss the playoffs all of a sudden, which is crazy. I don't know if I'm there, but this was a stat from Dimitri on X. The Devils have now played 1,368 5-on-5 minutes without one of Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier on the ice this season. They're scoring 1.49 goals in 60 in that time and getting outscored 52-34. In other words, they don't score with those 2 guys off the ice 5-on-5, and they get dominated. More specifically, probably Nico Hischier. When he's off, they struggle defensively. Like Nico's such a beast. He's always, in my opinion, an underrated Selke candidate, and now more so he's being recognized the last couple of years. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. I was also going to say my guy Johnny Lazarus, who works with BR as well, he thinks the Devils are going nowhere fast. And that's kind of been the conversation the last 2 days since the Hughes injury is the Devils have had some shaky games. And now with no Jack Hughes potentially till the playoffs, if they make the playoffs, like that's the conversation right now. And also shout out to JP who covers the Devils. He said with the Devils, Jack Hughes reportedly considering surgery for his shoulder injury. I have to think his $8 million cap hit will be added to LTIR before the trade deadline. With that in mind, you'd have to think GM Tom Fitzgerald needs to go big game hunting. Let's get into it. So he posted this morning. I mean, there's some speculation around the Devils doing also something massive because 1, they don't want to miss the playoffs. And 2, what's the timeline on Jack Hughes? Could he be back in 2 months? Like, could he be back for like a second round, hypothetically, if they got there? Again, I feel like that's like too hypothetical, and the Devils, can they even do that without Jack Hughes? Like, to me, he's like a pretty big heartbeat of the team. But JP says 1 Mikko Rantanen. According to Pierre LeBrun, the Devils have already called Carolina and told them that if they're truly selling Rantanen, they want in. And I think he's a legitimately perfect fit for this roster. There was a lot of speculation that the Devils were actually one of those teams that was like, hey, if you're considering this, we're all over it. The only problem is, again, Are you going to be trading in division? There is a very real possibility that the Devils and Hurricanes could play each other in the first round. Why would Carolina make that trade? Why? Explain to me why they would make that trade. It's just not happening in my eyes. I think if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, you're asking for Simone Nemec. You're asking for one of their forward prospects. You're asking for a first-round pick. That's a starting point. To get Mikko Rantanen from one division to another division rival is crazy. He is a very, very good offensive-driven forward who's probably, even with his struggles, still a top 20 player in the league, even with how he's been playing, because I think his ceiling is so high. Like, there's some players that just have that consistent, like 50, 60 point threshold where I think Mikko Rantanen can easily be 100 points every year with the right guy. I'm tired of hearing this narrative that he was just successful because of Nathan MacKinnon. I think that's false. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, he does drive off another offensive juggernaut. So if it's not Nathan MacKinnon, Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, like, he'd have to have one of those guys on his line. Most likely. Again, I feel like many times I saw Mikko Rantanen playing really well for Colorado for stretches, and he wasn't on Nathan MacKinnon's line at all. Like, they had that line split up a lot of times. So the other one for New Jersey would be Elias Pettersson. There was conversations about that prior to the Rangers acquiring JT Miller, that maybe the Devils were looking at JT Miller or Elias Pettersson. Yeah, and as JP says, I know some Devils fans are going to talk about, like, oh, Pettersson's too soft. The Devils are already too soft. But at the same time, I'll say this. If you need offense, Pettersson would be the guy, because to me, he just needs to be surrounded with a better mentality, better morale, skilled players. And at the end of the day, Elias Pettersson would fill the void for the time being of losing Jack Hughes the rest of the season. Well, again, do the Devils have the assets? I think they do. You attach a first-round pick. Here's the thing. I actually would not be surprised if the Canucks made a different deal for a center and then revisited this. Or, for example, just made it a huge blockbuster and got crazy and acquired one of their core guys in the top 6. I also think New Jersey would be a great fit for Brock Besser. I don't know if JP has Brock Besser on his list here, but I do think that Brock Besser is a perfect fit for the Devils too. I actually had Brock Besser as one of the fits for New Jersey prior to the Jack Hughes injury. I also had Carolina as one of the favorites too. So my perspective, I mean, it's changed a little bit because Jack Hughes has gone out. But yeah, that's the perspective. Also adding to the news, NHL insider Pierre LeBrun adding that Detroit is involved in this as well. Seattle's retaining 50% on Gourde, and so is Detroit before Gourde lands in Tampa. So basically 50% cuts it down to about 2 and a bit. And then the additional 50% on that cuts it down to under 2. Pretty crazy. I mean, Tampa's doing heavy business. So Detroit probably gets another pick in there. It's actually nuts what Tampa's done here. So I think this is going to be a bit of a domino effect. I think teams like Toronto and Florida are going to feel like they have to match up against this a little bit offensively. Like, specifically Toronto. They've done nothing. Florida, I mean, they acquired Seth Jones, but I think they're still looking for probably that forward. Like I said, in my predictions, I had Jared McCann maybe going to the Florida Panthers. I think that could make some sense, but we'll see. I'm kind of on the lens that I just feel like if you're wanting to win a Stanley Cup and you're wanting to be successful in the playoffs, you have to focus on the now. You can't always just focus. Like, here's the thing. Toronto made the biggest mistake ever acquiring Nick Foligno for a first-round pick when they had way more issues. Like Tampa Bay, they already have a winning culture. They already have the structure of their team. They have every element in place. They have a great top 4 defense. They have the goaltender. They have a great top 6 already. These are filler positions to add to it, to just literally support that already pre-existing core. Nick Foligno was never going to be that. So to me, to win a Stanley Cup, you have to add those different difference makers to support an already existing successful core. Toronto hasn't had that successful core. Neither has Ottawa in recent memory. So them acquiring Joe Schmo to try to contribute to a playoff run is just not going to work in my eyes. You need to add a major contributor to support the existing core. And in most cases, that's still not enough because you don't have that winning culture. It's so hard to win. It's so hard to break through that barrier. Tampa's done it. Florida's done it. Vegas has done it. Colorado's done it. I'm talking about in this decade, in this kind of new generation of hockey, those teams have done it. It's worked out for the NHL. Like I just named the 2 Florida markets and Las Vegas, Nevada. Like 10 years ago, no one's talking about those 3 markets being hockey markets. Now they are because there's winning. So for some of these bigger markets, do they necessarily need winning to have their fans follow them and follow the sport in their region? No. But I think internally for these organizations, whether it's Toronto, whether it's Ottawa, whether it's Carolina, you have to understand. That's why I loved what Carolina did, acquiring Mikko Rantanen, because it was that bold move. But at the same time, there was no plan in place. You traded Martin Necas, who was having a great year and who was under contract. That's a bit different. Had they traded prospects and picks and younger players for Mikko Rantanen, that's a little bit different. But trading one of your core players in Martin Necas, who was tearing it up, it's a bit more controversial. And I think I'm changing my title a little bit on the trade. Like I said, it was a Carolina win. But that was because I thought, and I think rightfully so, that if you're making a trade like that, trading Necas away and bringing in Rantanen, you are 1,000% confident you're getting an extension done within the week. So that's what I had said. When I was reacting to the trade, I was like, they are re-signing Mikko Rantanen. They have to. And it just didn't happen. So that's my take on it. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Let's see what else happens. I think there's going to be a lot more. Like we're about 48 hours away from the trade deadline. I think there's a lot more to come. Keep an eye on the trades. Keep an eye on Bleacher Report. I'll be live tomorrow for Bleacher Report, probably breaking some live trade that's happening. Then I'll maybe comment on some more predictions. So that will be tomorrow's show. And then Friday, I'll be live with some other creators on the Bleacher Report app here. And then also I'll be live at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time on Friday to recap the trades. So it's a lot of happening on Friday. Like I'm live on Hot Take Hockey, then live on Bleacher Report, then live on Bleacher Report for a recap. So thank you so much. Make sure you guys follow along on Bleacher Report app, as I said, on all social media platforms. NHL Daily, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time with some adjustments around these busy times of the year, trade deadline, playoffs, all that good stuff. So we will see you guys in the next one. Massive Tampa Bay Lightning trade, them acquiring Yanni Gourde and Bjorkstrand. More trades to come. We'll talk soon. Peace.